Again, if you're a guest or joining us online, we are in our series called Whatever, and this is week 6 of it already. We have 2 more weeks to go, but there's a battleground in our mind. Our thoughts and what we think about can really, truly define us. And so the question I've been asking last week, and I'll continue to ask throughout this series, is what did you think about this past week? Were there any worries or fears? How about any nationwide events that might have had our attention for a while? What did you think about? Was it something someone said or did that really bothered you? Or did you really take time to focus on what was true? Did you make a decision every day that you were going to follow what God says? That you were going to trust in His love and His forgiveness? And as we're coming forward with this next week, I want to just challenge you. What filter are you putting into your thoughts? Whenever you feel the need to worry, are we instead going to pray? Instead of looking on Facebook, how about we spend some time in His book? Instead of living with regret, how about we look forward with faith and with hope and with love? And this entire series we have based on one verse, Philippians 4:8, and I hope it's really been burned into your memories. It's on the screen behind us. Let's read this out loud together, church. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Which means that if it's not those things, we're not going to think about them. We're going to remove it from our mind. There's so much junk around in our fallen, broken world that we can't allow that to come into our thoughts. That we need to think about those things instead. We get to decide what comes in our mind and what comes out of our mind. And if you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus, this is probably the reason you're not. Because you've seen people who have said, I'm a follower of Jesus, but they don't think about whatever is true, noble, and right. And throughout this series, we've kind of been double-clicking on these words. So if you missed it, go to our website, yankton.church, our YouTube channel. But we talked about whatever is true. How honesty really starts with ourselves. Because I don't know about you, but I can really lie to myself a lot. And we need to be true with ourselves. When it talked about being noble, it talks about character. Character matters. We need to make a daily decision that we're going to follow good character. We talked about right and how righteousness comes from one place. It comes from Jesus. On my own, I have no righteousness. Last week, we talked about purity and how purity matters. Purity matters not just in what we eat or what we drink, but what we see and what we hear. Today, we're going to talk about what is love, and then we're going to talk about admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. And this series is going to take us all the way through Christmas, and I can't wait for that. So that's what we're going to be focused on. Again, I want these words to become a filter in our minds. When we truly have our thoughts and our processes, how are we following that into our mind? And just to have some fun with it, again, we've been doing our best Valley Girl impression, but I'm going to add a different one now, okay? Hey, how many of you had teenagers, okay? And did your teenagers, when you try to instruct them, they ever look at you and go, whatever? They ever do that, okay? So I'm going to add that one. You can do one. You can do Valley Girl, whatever, or you can do teenager, whatever. All right, ready? Which one? Go for it. Whatever, okay? This is whatever. Whatever, that's our little thought process. So whenever those negative things come around us and are in our minds, we're just going to have that filter that comes in that says whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right. And today, we're going to talk about love. Whatever it means to be love. And I'm not just talking about marriage, although that's a key part of it. Marriage is a gift from God and how that's one of the ways that we find out a lot about God. But love is not just in marriage. Love can be with a coworker. Love can be with our neighbor. Love is with our church as well. How do we truly think about love? And I just want to come back to something that's so significant to understand. When Jesus was here with his disciples on the night he was betrayed, he took them all into a room, and we call it the Last Supper. And they had a moment where Jesus brought his disciples together, and he said, listen, we've been together for 3 years, okay? If you forgot everything that I talk about, I want you to remember this one thing. If you forget everything I said, remember this one thing. And here's what it was. The entire world will know that you are followers of me by who you vote for. That's not what Jesus said. I just made it up, okay? Jesus taught his whole disciples, he said, listen, the whole world will know you are followers of me by what political party that you join. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus kind of said, listen, you will be followers of me. The whole world will know you're followers of me by what denomination you belong to. That's not what Jesus said. He said, you'll know you're followers of me by how you do communion. Like, do you do wafers? Do you do juice? Do you do wine? Do you do every week? Do you do it quarterly? That's not what he said. Jesus said, the whole world will know you're followers of me by how you get baptized. Do you do it as a baby? Do you do it as an adult? Do you sprinkle? Do you dunk? Do you hold them under until they really get saved, right? Like, Jesus didn't say any of that. Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, he brought his 12 disciples in. He said, if you forget everything I said for the last 3 years, remember this one thing. The whole world will know you are my disciples by how you love one another. And oh, by the way, I, your master and teacher, I'm going to show you love. This is how I'm going to show you love. Tonight, all of you are going to betray me. All of you are going to run away from me. One of you is going to betray me. And I'm going to go and I'm going to face death for you. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve to be treated that way, but I will come back and I will restore you. That is how I'm going to love you. Now, here's your challenge. Now, you got to go and you got to love everyone else in that same way. And Jesus did exactly that. He said, if you forget everything, remember this one thing. The whole world will know you're my disciples by how you love one another. And can I just be honest with you? I think that's why churches struggle. It's because we forget that one thing. And we get distracted by all these other things that don't really matter. See, we are given a charge, and I can say this. I've been a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ in Yankton, South Dakota for 7 years, and I can tell you that one of the main reasons why most people right now would rather be in bed or at home than in church is because we miss this one thing. We get distracted by things that don't really matter, and we forget it's how we love one another. That's what the world is looking for. And that group of disciples that was in the room with Jesus that night, all of them would end up giving their lives for this reason. They would change the entire world by how they loved one another. They modeled what it meant to love one another the way that Christ did it. I just wonder, are we ready to do that as a church here? Because I'll just say this, 7 years being a pastor in Yankton, South Dakota, I've seen a lot of other things happen. And I'm just going to say this. I think there's a lot of people who don't come to church with probably good reason. Because are we really, truly loving the way that Christ loves us too? And here's my thought on this. And you can push back on this if you want. We are called by Jesus to love one another the way that he loved us, right? But we struggle with that sometimes. Here's my thought on this, and you can push back if you want to. I think the reason why we struggle with loving people the way that Jesus called us to is people are difficult to love. Okay? Now, none of you are difficult to love. You guys are all great. It's all wonderful, right? If you're new to Celebrate, I'm lying, okay? We're all the other people out there, right? They can be difficult to love. So how do we manage that? How do we walk in that tension between Jesus says we're called to love people, but people are difficult to love? How do we live out the call of Christ says? I've got a really good suggestion. Let's open up his word. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If you have Connected Celebrate, you should have got a text with those notes and verses. God's word is going to change your life. My word isn't. I hope you're in God's word. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1. If I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Husbands, don't look at your wives right now, okay? Just if we say anything, but I don't have love, I'm a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all the mysteries and all the knowledge and have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give my body over to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Do you know what Paul's saying here? You can say whatever you want. You can know everything in Scripture. You can give all of your possessions away, but if you don't have love, it is worthless. Love is not in what you say. Love is not even in what you give. It's not even in what we do. And Paul will go on in verse 4 to give us the greatest description of love, I argue, ever exists in human history. In fact, the reason why I say that is because this verse is read at weddings all the time. In fact, it was read at my wedding. It might have been read at yours as well. 1 Corinthians 13:4. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. To which we would say, okay, Paul, I agree with you on that. Yeah, love should be patient, kind. We should be humble with it. We should honor, put the other person first. Forgiving, truthfulness. I agree with all those things. The problem comes when we get to verse 7. And this is why I wonder if when people have this read at their wedding, if they actually know what they're saying. Because look at what it says in verse 7. This is hard to swallow. Actually, verse 7, let's read this out loud together. It'll be on the screen behind me. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. See, I don't think we really believe that. I think we like to say it sounds good, but does it really do that? See, the word always that Paul uses there is the word pas. Look at your neighbor and say, pas. Pas, that's what the word means. You know what pas means? It means always. It means every situation, all the time. Love means I'm going to always protect. I'm going to provide cover, shelter. I'm going to always trust. I'm going to believe in the other person, and I'm going to believe the best about them. Love means I'm going to always hope. I'm going to expect the best, that tomorrow will be better than today. Always perseveres. I will remain and I will endure. Love always does that. To which I ask the question, is that your experience with love? In your life and in your family and maybe in your marriage, does love always protect, trust, hope, and perseveres? You know what I think sometimes we experience? Instead, love doesn't always protect. Sometimes love means we delight in uncovering mistakes. Like, look at what you did. Ha ha, got you. I caught you in that. Sometimes love thrives on suspicion. You got to prove to me. You are guilty until proven innocent. I'm not going to believe what you say. Sometimes what we experience is not hope, but we assume the worst about somebody. If something happens and we don't know what actually happened, we automatically assume the worst and put the worst case scenario in there before we get the facts. Sometimes love doesn't always endure, and sometimes it embraces doubt or suspicion. We always wonder what's going to happen when the next shoe is going to drop. See, when it comes to love, we all have an expectation. What we believe love should be. But the challenge is people are what? Difficult to love. We have the expectation, but our experience is down here, and there's a gap between what we expect and what we experience. You told me you'd be home at 6 o'clock tonight, and it's 7:30, and I haven't even got a text yet. There's a gap. There's expect, there's experience. How about this one? You said you watched the budget this month, and it's only November 10th, and we're already broke already. There's an expectation. There's an experience. How about this one? You stood at an altar. You promised to love, honor, and cherish me through sickness and health, forsaking all others. And now you're telling me that our marriage is over. See, when it comes to love, there's an expectation that we have, and there's an experience. And because we're human beings, there's sometimes a gap between what I expect and what I experience. What do we do when we experience that gap? Because we will. I don't care who the person is, we're going to experience that gap. There's a book that Marcus Buckingham wrote called The One Thing You Need to Know. Fantastic book. But in this book, he cites a study. Now, this is going to be about marriage, but this is going to apply to every situation. Again, don't get stuck on marriage. It can be a friendship, coworker, church relationship. He did a study of 105 couples with the average relationship was 10 years. They had each one of those 105 couples rate the happiness in their relationship with a list of qualities about their partner. So each partner rated the other partner in level of happiness. Then they had two groups. They had a group called unhappy couples and a group called happy couples. So what they did is they took the unhappy couples study and they realized exactly what we found. They have an expectation, they have an experience, and there's a gap in there. Their unhappiness is a direct relation to, I thought this was going to happen, this is what I'm experiencing, therefore we're unhappy. Makes sense, right? That's logic. But what they did is they said, okay, now let's look at the happy couples. What's the difference? What's the key between a happy couple and an unhappy couple? And they had a hypothesis. They said, well, in the unhappy couples, there's the expectation, there's the experience, they're unhappy, so probably what happened is they've just lowered their expectation. See, the reason why we're happy is because we want up here, but we're just going to lower our expectation. That was their assumption. What they found is mind-blowing, but it makes sense when you think about it. When they looked at the happy couples and how they rated their partner, what they found was the exact opposite. Happy couples consistently rated their partners higher than the partner rated themselves. This is a direct quote from what the study was. Look at this. The happiest couples rated their partners more positively in every category that their partner rated themselves. And this is the line I love so much. They had an unrealistic, positive view of the person they loved. I love that. They didn't lower their expectation, they raised the expectation. See, listen, they didn't lower their expectation, they raised their expectation. The experience that they had, there's a gap, but instead of thinking negatively, I'm going to believe the best in my person. To which you might say, okay, does that really happen? It happens all the time. Think back to a romantic relationship when you first fell in love. Didn't you have an unrealistic, positive view of that person? Yeah, sure, they might be, kind of hard with money, but I really think they're really cute. I really like them. You kind of overlook all those red flags, right, in the beginning part of the relationship. We all do this, don't we? Yeah, I know that he's kind of irresponsible, but I'm going to change him. Whenever I hear couples say that, I get a little nervous, right? Yeah, I know they can be kind of overbearing, but I'm sure they'll kind of mellow out over time, right? It doesn't happen. An unrealistic, positive view. This is what they found, and this is so interesting. Watch this. What they found was an upward spiral of love. Now, I want to remind you, this is not just romantic love. This can be friendship, coworkers, sibling, could be our church. Having a positive view of the other person creates a conviction in the other person. That conviction leads to security in the relationship. You recognize they're not out to get me. They believe the best in me when you have a positive view of the person. That security leads to high levels of trust. And trust is key in any relationship. Trust then leads to intimacy, which is the highest form of human relationship. In intimacy, it says, I want to be fully known and fully accepted, flaws and all. They know everything about me. They know my faults and flaws, but they still love me and they still believe the best in me. Which I would come back to say if this study would only have read their Bibles. Because this is what Paul said. Look at verse 7 again. Love always protects. It always trusts, it always hopes, it always perseveres. See, love is determined by what you put in the gap. All of us have an expectation, and we all have experience that can come short of that. What you put in the gap will make the biggest difference in your love for each other. Come on. Isn't that the love we want for each other? Isn't that the love that I want from my spouse, from my boss, from my coworkers, from my siblings, from my parents? Isn't that the love that God freely gives to each one of us? God understands that there's going to be a gap between what he expects of us. God expects us to be what? Holy and perfect. God understands the experiences. We're not going to be that. We need to recognize that there's going to be a gap. How we choose to fill that gap matters. So what do we do when the command is to love one another? And there's going to be a gap between what we expect and experience. Can I just show you something? 46 years of living, this is what I found. How do you love in the gap? You always protect. Always protect. There's a song by Nazareth that love hurts. Ooh, ooh, love hurts. It's been a while since I sang, so it's probably a good time to do that now, right? Listen, love should never hurt. Love should never hurt. Love should always protect physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually. You care about that other person. You don't want them to hurt themselves. You don't want them to hurt their emotions. You don't want to hurt them body. You don't want to hurt their relationship with God. And we're not talking defensive. I want to protect you even from yourself. Love always protects. There's a phrase that my dad taught me a long time ago, and I so appreciate this. Praise in public, correct in private. I'm going to say that again. Praise in public, correct in private. Listen, sometimes we need to address the behavior. When the experience doesn't meet the expectation, I'm not saying you blow over it. I'm not saying you roll over it. I'm saying there's a gap. We need to address it. But what it does say is I'm going to keep it between us. It means to protect means I've got your back. I'm not going to speak ill of you. I'm not going to allow anyone else to speak ill of you in my presence. I'm going to praise you in public, but I'm going to correct in private. I had the opportunity to be a supervisor for a lot of my different positions. I've supervised probably hundreds of people. And I always had a rule. I told all of my employees the exact same rule. This is the rule. No one gets to yell at you except for me. Okay? So if you ever have a customer that comes and yells at you, you send them directly to me. Don't engage them. You send them to me. Because why? I got your back. Nobody yells at my employees except for me. There was customers that I actually fired because they mistreated my staff. And I said, you're not going to do that. Listen, even if the staff is wrong, okay, because that sometimes happens, you don't get to treat my staff that way. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to believe the best of my staff. I'm going to protect them. That's what love does. Love always protects. It doesn't mean we don't have conversations. We need to have the conversation. We need to follow up. We need to grow. We need to get better. But in that moment, at that time, I've got your back. I'm not going to let anybody talk bad about you, including myself. Love always protects. There is a term called mama bear. And all the mamas understand this, right? This is my child. My first response is to go, roar. That's what always protects means. Listen, I'm not going to let anybody speak bad about you, including myself. Love always protects. But here's the second one. Love always trusts. Listen, we've all been hurt. And if we're not careful, the hurt from our past can rob our current relationships. Those hurts can stay with us, and they can make us defensive, and sometimes without even knowing it. Did you know that there's certain actions or words that can trigger you, and you automatically start to assume suspicion? We wonder what they're thinking. What do they mean by that? What did they really say? What did that text mean? I better check their phone to see what they're looking at, right? All of those things start to come in our mind. See, suspicion, the problem with suspicion is it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. How many of you know if you're looking for a problem, you're going to find a problem? You don't have to look very far. Listen, if you're new to Celebrate and you're wondering if there's problems in our church, you won't have to look very far, okay? Just come to me, and I'll tell you. I'll point them out to you as well. There's things that we need to work on. If you're looking for a problem, you'll find it. But look at verse 6 again. Love does not delight in evil, but what? Rejoices with the truth. There's always a reason. Love means I'm going to find out what the truth is. What really happened? You know what I found more often than not? Most times the people don't even know they're doing it. We have to find that out, have that conversation. I said before how when I was a supervisor, nobody yelled at the employee except for me, okay? This is what I'm going to say. If you're part of this church and you have a problem with somebody in our church, come talk to me. We need to sit down. We need to have that conversation. We need to understand what's really going on. Let's peel back the layers and find out what's the heart of the situation. Because there might be something that you don't know or understand. That's what we always trust. Always trust means I'm going to seek the truth. Love always protects and always trusts. Here's number 3. It always hopes. Listen, love isn't trying to catch the other person doing something wrong. That's the job of a police officer. We're not to be police officers. Love isn't building a case against a person. That's what a lawyer does. Love isn't keeping score to make sure I'm winning and you're losing. That turns love into a game. Some of us have really good memories, and that could be a problem. Some of us have those situations where they pull out the file. Well, back on January 6, 1997, this is what you did to me, okay? Some of us have that good memory. That doesn't always hope. That's keeping the past where it is. Some of us need to find that folder and just delete it, okay? Don't keep going back to the past. Look forward to your future. Hope means I always believe you will be better tomorrow than you are today. Always hope means I care more about your future than your past. Let's continue to grow and get better together. Love means we always protect, we always trust, we always hope. Here's number 4, always perseveres. Love means I'm not going anywhere. Now listen, sometimes you need to put up some boundaries. And I say this all the time. If you're in a relationship that is physically, verbally, or sexually abusing, or if somebody is hurting themselves, you need to put boundaries up. But here's the thing. Always persevere means that I believe one day I won't have to. One day I believe that you will come around and you will change. But in the meantime, I am not going to be collateral damage to your bad choices. You'll need to put up boundaries. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to protect myself, but I'm also going to believe the best in you. I'm not going anywhere. See, it's easy to hurt. We all had people who've hurt us and have left. That's easy. You know what's harder is when people hurt you and you can stay the course. You can say, I'm going to see the stand. I'm not going anywhere. That kind of love perseveres. And come on, that's God's love for us. Jesus was asked one time, how many times should I forgive somebody when they sin against me? And Jesus said, how many times do you want me to forgive you? What's the number? How many times have I forsaken God? What's the number? Does God have a number on me that if, as soon as I reach a certain point, okay, sorry, Jeff, you're out? I'm sure glad he doesn't do that. Love always perseveres. To be the love of Christ means I'm not giving up on you. It means I'm always going to protect, trust, hope, and perseveres. Look at verse 4 again. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. And every time there is a gap between what we expect and what we experience, it will happen. I am going to choose to always protect. As a follower of Jesus Christ, my first response is I'm going to defend that person until I hear otherwise, until I talk to them. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to always trust. I'm going to seek the truth. It doesn't mean we don't have conversations with people. We need to have conversations. That's the love of that. But I'm going to find out what's really going on. What's the issue behind the issue? And more often than not, they're not even aware it's happening. We need to bring that up. That's what trust means. We're going to always hope that tomorrow will be better than today. We are not going to let our past define us or rob us of our future. I'm going to have hope that you're going to be better tomorrow than today. And we're going to always persevere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stand by your side. I'm going to be here. I might have to put up some boundaries, but I'm not going to give up on you. And isn't that the kind of love that all of us want to get? Come on. Isn't that the kind of love that God gives to each one of us? And Jesus, who knew all and saw all, said, if you get this one thing, if you forget everything else I say, if you do this one thing right, if you would love other people the way I have loved you, by this, all of the world will know you're my disciples. And I speak bad against churches, and I just want to be careful when I say that. I just want you to understand my heart. I've been here 7 years now. And I will just say it, our church is not immune from it. I guarantee we're not. There's probably been times where I've failed and I've messed this up. But I'm telling you, church, as much as I can just hear into my heart, if we do this one thing right, if we choose whenever there's a gap between what we expect and we experience, that we're going to always do those things. There's not a building in Yankton big enough to hold that church. There will people that will flood here because that is what it means to love the way that Christ loved us. And every time that we do that right, that's what makes a significant difference in our world. Let's pray. Jesus, I just go back to that moment where you were in that room and you knew that one of your closest disciples was about to betray you. You knew that everyone in that room was going to abandon you. You knew that every person you healed or fed or saw your teachings or listened to you would be standing there and watching you be hanging on a cross, condemned unjustly. Jesus, you knew that. And yet in that moment, you still said, listen, we need to love one another the way that I've loved you. God, I need your forgiveness because there are some times in my life where I haven't loved the way that you have called me to love. And I'm sorry about that. God, every single person in this room, if we went around, could think of some situation, maybe even this week, maybe even this morning, where we didn't love the way that you've called us to love. And Jesus, that's the first step, is we need to ask for your forgiveness. And God, I just pray that you will give us the strength and the wisdom to unpack how in Yankton, South Dakota, we can love other people. How that love can always protect. God, I pray that our first response whenever we hear or think something negative about another person, our first response is to say, nope, I probably misunderstood that. I'm going to defend them. I'm not going to go negative. I'm going to first of all defend them. But then I'm going to always trust. I'm going to seek the truth. I'm going to find out what's really going on here. Let's dig down. Let's go underneath and find out how we can trust. God, we're going to always hope. We're going to believe the best in people, that tomorrow is going to be better than today. God, when I look around this room and I see people in our congregation, I've seen how much they've grown over the past 6 months or years or several years. God, I'm excited for our future. And I'm so grateful that when people looked at me so many years ago, they believed the best in me. And they had a hope that one day I would be a pastor of a church. And you've given me that privilege, God. God, I pray that we will always persevere. God, it's easy to walk away. It's easy to pack up and go. But Lord, it's a lot harder to stay the course. But it's also much more rewarding. Because God, you have never given up on anyone in this room. You have persevered through all our sin, through all our struggle, through all our shame. You have endured with us. How much more should we endure with our fellow brothers and sisters in this room? And God, I'm just going to ask that right now, every person in this room, or anybody who's watching online, that you will put a name of someone on their heart right now. And maybe it's someone that they need to show love to. Maybe it's someone that they need to show a little better love to. Whatever the situation, God, I pray that you would put someone on our hearts. And maybe, God, maybe we're going to reach out to them today or tomorrow or at some point this week, God. And we're going to make this stand about how we're going to choose to love. God, maybe there's a situation that happened where our expectation has not met our experience, and there's been a gap there, God. Maybe there's a conversation we need to have. Maybe there's an attitude of hope we need to change. Instead of continually feeling negative about the situation, God, we have hope instead. God, maybe there's someone that we've given up on or brushed off in our life that we need to reach out to and just say, listen, I just want to see how you're doing. I want you to know that I still believe in you. And I want you to know that I'm still here for you no matter what. God, whatever that is or whoever that is, I pray that you would give each one of us the wisdom and the courage to love the way that you commanded us to do. And when our world around us is full of stuff and we're not sure what to do, God, we would take captive our thoughts and we would think about whatever is lovely. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.